Good evening, everybody. How are we doing tonight? Great. Welcome to Tree of Life. Welcome to those of you that are watching us online. We are going to have a special couple of Wednesday nights. We have our friend, missionary to Japan, Patrick Stitt, is going to be leading the Bible study for the next couple of Wednesday nights. And as you can probably see on your screen, he's talking about politics and the Bible and what is the biblical stance on politics, not on what type of politics or how does the Bible relate to politics. And I think it's going to be very interesting. I want to just take a minute to open in prayer and give a couple logistical things, and then we'll bring Patrick up. Lord, thank you. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this time that we could gather together. I pray, Lord, that you would pour out your Holy Spirit on this time, that we would dig in and learn and be ready to understand your perspective on some things that really affect us greatly. Thank you, Lord. Thank you that you don't leave us alone. You always have a perspective, and you always have words that we need to hear. Thank you. We love you. We praise you, and we give you all the glory. In Jesus' name, amen. And so for those of you that are here, if you want to ask questions, get my attention, and I will bring a microphone over to you for the sake of people that are watching online that they can hear. Otherwise, if you're not talking into a mic and they're watching the video, and we don't want that to happen. We want them to be able to hear what's happening and not just see people's lips move. So with that, Patrick, come on up.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pastor Troy. So glad to be here, and so lovely to be back. You know, here a few months ago, and it just was wonderful to share about Japan, and you know, it was nice to leave on a high of what God, the amazing things God's doing in the nations, and now I'm going to annoy you all by talking politics. So, yeah, we'll see how we do. So if you're a very strong right wing or very strong left wing, you're going to be offended. But what we'll do tonight, what we'll do over the next couple of weeks, we'll start and we're going to just talk some definitions. We're just going to define some of the political ideas that are very common in our discourse today. Then next week we're going to talk a little bit about where God's view of empires and politics, of kind of a history of political ideas in the Bible. And then the week after that, we're going to pick some big ticket items. We're going to talk about controversial items and how we as Christians can respond in this day and age. The reason I got started in this subject, I wrote my graduate thesis when I kind of realized how much politics Jesus talked about. He really, really loved to talk politics, but the words he used are not words we use, so it didn't click very well. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland, for those of you who might be old enough to remember, Belfast was not a very nice place, a lot of nastiness, and it was political division that got tied to religion. And what ended up happening in that situation was two groups of people that were really quite similar on most things felt that they couldn't live the life they were supposed to live if the other people existed, that the other group was trying to destroy their country and destroy their way of life. And so they fought about flags, and they fought about songs they were supposed to sing, and which group was better and which group was trying to destroy this country or that country. It really came to a head to me when I was about 17 or 18. And I'm from the nationalist side, the sort of Catholic Irish side of Northern Ireland. But I was sitting with these two ladies who were Protestant British from Northern Ireland. And they were the nicest two ladies I ever met. And they were so sweet, and they were serving me tea and scones, and we were having a lovely time. And it was very interesting. It was challenging for me to be there because I was raised that these were the baddies, you know, these were the ones who were trying to destroy our way of life, you know, and in their own way, they probably had gotten behind some pretty nasty ideas that would have been destructive to my people. It was really funny, though. I talked a little bit about my faith and being a Christian, I was living in the Republic at that time, and one of the ladies looked at me and reached out and said, "Oh, you live in the Republic as a Christian, and tell me, How is that? Because don't they take the Bibles off you at the border? Now, God love her, she genuinely believed that they took Bibles off people who went into the Republic of Ireland. And this was such a strange... And now my initial response was to say, how stupid are you? You really think they're taking Bibles off people? Do you think there's nothing better to be doing in Ireland than worrying who's bringing an old King James across the border? But the Holy Spirit calmed me down a bit and sort of said, this woman was taught this. Someone told her that people are trying to destroy her faith, trying to destroy her way of life. And they lied to her. And she is bought this because she loves me and she loves her community and she loves her values. And she has been taught that the only way she can really live this out is by the destruction of another group. And so instead I changed it and approached it with sympathy. And I've seen a lot of the same things happen in America recently. How dialogue has kind of broken down. How we've made an idol out of our different political ideologies. Recent statistic where 30% of Americans say they would be very upset if someone in their family married someone of the opposing political party. And that really shows that, politics was never supposed to come above family. And when we're getting to that place and those numbers getting worse, it's time to reassess, especially as the church, especially as people who are called to be God's representative in a tough age. And it's very interesting. Americans often, when we go through a crisis, we often put aside the things that divide us and say, let's work on it together to get better. But this pandemic we're going through seemed to make us more divided. People got so entrenched in either side. And so it's time for us to address certain things and to kind of assess where our Christian faith can be in response to things like this. So let's talk a little bit about this. What is politics? It's from the Latin, poly meaning many, and tic meaning blood-sucking parasites. Not really. Politics is the science of determining the best means to accomplish comfort, prosperity, and preservation of the political class. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful. What does it mean? Basically, a politician's job is to make the people in charge be comfy, have plenty of stuff, and their way of life and the way they want to do things be secure. Now, in North Korea, the political class is a tiny group of people who are friends of Kim Jong-un. In America, the political class is supposed to be everybody. All people vote, so all people have a say in how the country is run. In other countries where they have an elite class of politicians or a monarchy, it's all based around supporting the top class. But basically what it comes down to is how do we get this group comfort, prosperity, and preservation? Now, as strange as it seems, we all kind of agree on this. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders both agree on this. They want most people to have comfort, prosperity, and preservation. All they disagree about is the means to do it. One wants to do it one way, one wants to do it another. And politics is a discussion about the best means. But we all are trying to get across comfort, prosperity, and preservation for the people around us. Now, this sounds great, and it's simple. Okay, we're all on the same page. But we as Christians are initially off to a big problem. Next slide. Because what did Jesus tell us about our comforts? The foxes have the holes and the sparrows have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. We are really, give all you have and sell to the poor. Following Jesus is not going to be comfortable. What about our prosperity? Well, you can't serve both God and money. What does God say about your prosperity? Easier for a rich man to enter the eye of a needle, a camel to go through the eye of a needle, and a rich man to get into heaven. What about our preservation? Preserving our life and preserving our way of doing things. Take up your cross, follow me. Whoever would save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Right away, the entire thrust of politics gets upended by being a Christian. Because being a Christian is a call for us to give up the very things politics is trying to secure for us. And that's a little bit awkward. So sometimes when Christians get very heavy in this way of doing things, we can get lost on our fundamental Christian values. So what we'll talk a little bit tonight, now that doesn't mean we give up and we disconnect. It's not a bad thing to say, how can we improve the economy for people? If you are poor for Jesus, be poor for Jesus. But we also are called to relieve poverty. It's good to have things that can help get people out of poverty. While we want to, give things up, we also want to help the homeless. While we're willing to suffer, we also want to get people out of human trafficking. It's okay for us to talk about these things, but fundamentally remembering they're not our ultimate goals. So we'll talk about a few different political ideologies tonight. We'll go through them. I'll introduce them, and then I want to hear from you guys what you think about them. And so the first one we'll talk about is our next slide being right-wing. Oh, no, actually, we'll skip these next two. We'll skip Republican, Democrats. We'll go to being right-wing. Yep, there it is. I'll have to change this. This poor old Rush Limbaugh. He's gone from us now. Well, what does it mean to be right-wing? We talk a lot about being right. Well, it's a very new idea. We used to never talk about being right-wing, but the past few years, right-wing has become very popular in America. And what does right-wing mean? It means that there's a belief that the natural hierarchy of mankind cannot be resisted. And the best way to help society is to gear laws and education and economy to support the powerful, usually at the expense of the weak. Let me break that down a little bit better. Okay. The idea is basically that some people, and if anyone's got their Bibles, I might have you get for me Matthew 25, and we will go for verse 29 and 30. Matthew 25, verse 29 and 30. And while you're looking that up, I'll break this down a little bit. What becomes incredibly apparent right away when you look at the world is certain people are really good at rising to the top. They're just great at it. And certain people are not so good at it. And that's a bit tough. Now, it might seem a little bit unfair, but the reality is, this is, for example, it's almost always the same people who have number one singles. A tiny, tiny percentage of the population has gold medals. And that's not going to change. A tiny percent of authors actually make enough money and sell their multi-million-dollar books. So all the authors in the world. The principle actually is something that sociologists call the Matthean principle. And it comes from the book of Matthew. Does anyone have that verse ready? Oh, there we have it. Thank you so much. I can read it here. For whoever has been given... whoever has been given more, they will have abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. And we'll just leave it there, but we'll skip that verse. And sociologists call this the Matthean principle. And it's the idea that in every society, 20% of people are going to have about 80% of the accomplishments. It tends to be the same people who are hyper producers. And that's kind of an incredible thing. In the world, the top 26 billionaires own as much as the poorest 3.8 billion people. 26 people on the planet have more than half the planet. In 2007, 1%, less than 1% of the country has 38% of the wealth, but the bottom percent holds the vast majority, about 80% of the debt. There's a certain group of people who are doing particularly well. Now, this, of course, is something that it might seem a little bit harsh, but unfortunately, it's not something we can fight. There's often been groups that have basically decided, like, for example, Uganda. In Uganda, the top earners, the guys at the top, the people who own businesses and banks and schools were Indians. And they said an Indian seemed to run the country. So a guy called Idi Amin, who was a Ugandan, said, I've got a great idea. Let's kick out all the Indians. And he said, if we kick those guys out, everyone else will get stuff at the top. What happened? The entire economy collapsed. And everything got messed up. So what happened was, that was a mess, and Idi Amin fell. And then all the Indians came back. But they came back with nothing. They didn't get their banks back, and they didn't get their schools back or their businesses back. What happened 10 years later? Indians were running everything again. Because these were a group that just naturally rose to the top. So it's people who are right-wing look at society and say, it seems like there's these people who are just going to rock it. Let's make things work for them. Why are we trying to help out these immigrants or this poor group or welfare things. Why are we helping those guys out? Let's have tax breaks for the guys at the top. Let's create a system that supports them. Because maybe that will trickle down. Okay, that's basically right-wing concept in a nutshell. Any questions or thoughts on right-wing as we move forward? Oh, you're very quiet. Can anyone tell me what might be the great fatal flaw in being right-wing? Well, being right-wing is very often associated with the group at the top deciding that they're on the top for a reason and that they were kind of created great. So right-wing people often will teach something like, we're at the top because we're white. And that the world would just be better if only white people were on the top. Or we're at the top because we're men, and it would be better if only men were at the top, and we'll create society like that. Or we're at the top because we're native born, and we should create a society that works like that. Right-wing groups often tend to move towards becoming prejudiced against other groups because they believe we've got to figure out who's on the top and basically make society work so those guys are always there. Okay, let's talk a little bit about being left-wing. Okay, there's our good friend Bernie Sanders. I always think he looks so fun, you know? A great way. So Bernie's up there telling us, no, it is not right in this country. The billionaires have got all the money, and we need to give it away. So he's a great guy. My brother's met Bernie a few times, actually. He's good friends. But being left-wing, what does it mean to be left-wing? It's kind of the opposite. Bernie would tell us that the social hierarchy, the reason certain people are always at the top, is a social construct that we can change. It's something we've just built as a society, and we can change it if we want to. And the best way to help everybody is to gear laws, education, and the economy to help the weak, to help those in the bottom, generally at the expense of the powerful. Bernie would be a big fan of taxing the top 2% and giving it to people at the bottom. That's fundamentally what left-wing is. If anyone would like to read our Bible, it would be Luke 1:51 to 53. Luke 1:51 to 53. Now, let's break down being left-wing a little bit. Left-wing basically says, it looks at inequality and says, why is there inequality? Why is it that we have tremendous poverty in the black community or the Native American community? And why do these things exist? And they would look at them and say, they exist because the guys at the top told us a myth that they were supposed to be on the top. And that thing turned out to be false. And in fact, there's a great deal of truth to that idea. Basically, what we found with those guys, let's say if we did an experiment. If we took a kid who was born in the nastiest, poorest ghetto part of Detroit, and we took him out of Detroit and put that child in the house of an orthodontist in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is a really wealthy area, and we took the kid of the orthodontist from Scottsdale, Arizona, and we put that kid in the poverty in Detroit, the kid who was raised in Detroit would end up probably staying in poverty. Whereas the kid that we took out of Detroit and put into Scottsdale would probably end up accomplishing quite a lot. So a left-wing person looks at that and says, well, why don't we just give these guys at the bottom some of the stuff from the people at the top, and that will help lift them up. And that's left-wing ideology and what they've basically said, all these theories about racial inequality, that certain races are smarter than everyone else, that right-wings told us, that's false. Certain things that men had a greater capacity to be producers than women, that ended up being false. What they found was that it seems to be cultures can create, or certain environments help people to grow and certain ones don't. And left-wing people said, let's give them all kinds of different environments. And so let's read this great Bible verse. He, being God, has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their innermost thoughts. But he has brought down rulers from their thrones, but lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but he has sent the rich away empty. Does anyone know which violent communist wrote this piece of left-wing propaganda? This would be Mary, the mother of Jesus. And this will be great. Communists look at this and say, yep, that's right. Yes, we're gonna take the people at the bottom and the rich, we're going to take all their stuff. It's a little bit heavy. So this is fundamentally what left-wing ideology is. There is, of course, one big, giant question that hovers over being left-wing. Anyone tell me what it might be? Who's going to pay for all this stuff? You want to take away stuff from people who are hyper-producing, and you want to give it to other people. So these people just have to pay. They have to pay for people they're not fundamentally responsible for. And the problem with being left-wing has come out that every system that has tried to bring about greater equality has been a massive inequality has been a fundamental failure. Any system that's tried to say we're going to take it so all people are going to be equal, have equal opportunity if we've just given the right stuff, has fundamentally failed. And the more we tend to find, the more freedom you give people, the more we find certain people get ahead and certain people don't. But one of the issues we're facing right now in America is the struggle of the American dream. It used to be thought in America that if you come here and you work hard and you're innovative and you do something great, you're going to get ahead. You're going to make it. That will all work out for you. The problem is this is becoming less and less true. Less and less people are actually able to get out of the economic class they were born into. It used to be people came from Europe to go to America to have greater opportunity. But today, a child born in poverty in Europe is more likely to get out of poverty than a child born in poverty in America. And as we're seeing this, and as more and more Americans are struggling to get ahead, or struggling to buy housing, or invest in their education, or be able to afford health insurance, they're having less and less faith in the system. And what do people do when the system doesn't work for them anymore? What do you think? Oh, they burn it down. They don't try to take it, because taking is responsibility. Yeah, they'll burn it down. Now, while we might say, it's not terrible, what a stupid bunch of people, it's still the reality. And if they're part of a system that isn't going to help them, they will just destroy the system. And that's a bit of a struggle we'll face in the days ahead. Tell me any thoughts on right-wing or left-wing before we keep on keeping on. All right, okay. Usually politics gets people being very chatty. And any just, it doesn't have to be a question, just any observations or things of that nature. All right, well, we'll keep on. The next thing we'll discuss is capitalism. Or no, we'll do conservatism. We'll do conservatism first. So what does it mean to be conservative? Now, I want to establish this. Conservatism is not the same as right-wing. That's a new thing that's happened in America where we have seen people who are conservative become right-wing over the past couple of years, but they're very different ideologies. Conservatism, and there's our Waltons in there being very conservative, is a commitment to traditional values and ideas with an inherent suspicion of change or innovation. Now, this was started, modern conservatism, founded by a guy called Edwin Burke. And he lived about 170 years ago. And he looked at the world and says, wow, the world is brilliant. I can just walk down the street and nobody bothers me. And I can go and I can have money in my pocket and put it in the bank and the bank will keep it and I can go buy something and just, it's great. I can go buy a bit of candy or some new clothes or a house. The world is brilliant. And his thing was like, he looked at that and said, it's kind of like a house of cards. And because the world is so wonderful today, we really, really shouldn't mess with it too much. Because if you start to fiddle with the knobs and rearrange the cards, what if this whole great, amazing society we've built comes crashing down? So a conservative would say, and when people say, we want to redefine what it means to be a family, you know, can it be two parents of the same gender, or no kids, or people living together? A conservative say, hold on. The family unit is really important. It matters. It's part of the reason the world succeeds. So don't mess with that too much. This is it's really an important thing. And so with this concept, and this would be, we'd often see it in the Bible where they might say, look to the ways of your fathers. Look to the way things were in those great days. And that's why we see a lot in America too. Oh, the good old days. Back in my day in America, things were much better than that. And so when we see new ideas, a conservative is suspicious. They want to roll the clock back. And this is something all humans do. Whenever we're a bit scared, whenever something is weird to us, we revert to what we know. When a kid is scared, they run to mommy. When an adult is scared, we roll back the clock to the way we've always done things. And this can be a little bit tough for us. Got another slide here about that. Yep, there's our two cavemen said, look at that. Give me the good old days when man carried a club and walked semi-erect and had a brain the size of a walnut. What might be the fundamental problem with conservatism? Exactly. It's good for life to change. Some changes are really, really good. It's a good thing that everyone can have an opportunity to vote or to work outside the home. The technology that we have has saved billions of lives. The world we have is a really, really great setup. So, and the changes we've seen are really, really positive. Some are not so much, but if we don't risk it, we don't see some good things change. Okay, so we'll keep any thoughts on conservatism at all? All right, we'll keep on keeping on. Next one is liberalism. Anyone? I don't know if anyone remember Captain Planet? No. You got some? Okay. Yeah, we got some Captain Planet fans. When we were kids, he was our Saturday morning favorite, the blue-skinned, green mullet-waving Captain Planet who went out there to save the environment from all the, the bad people who burnt fossil fuels and used radioactive material. So liberalism is this idea that says the pursuit of freedom from social ills through government intervention and social involvement. Liberalism basically says, let's fix the world. Let's look at the problems and let's get all of us together to make a change and make this not a problem anymore. And so they would look at things like poverty and said, all right, let's guys all get together and we'll go out there and we'll fix poverty. Or they'll look at healthcare and say, let's fix it. Let's fix a situation where a certain group is suffering and let's change that. And that's a great thing. It's a really good thing because there's some problems in the world and we do want to fix those things. And that's where it comes. But often liberalism wants to liberate itself from old ideas. Well, we don't want to hold on to antiquated ideas of capitalism or antiquated ideas of personal property or things like that. So a liberal doesn't feel that they have to hold on to those things. They feel we can change those things as we go along. Now, liberalism is not necessarily associated with being left-wing. A friend of mine, there's a movement right now, and it's about financially subsidizing adoptions, because you can get an abortion for free, but it costs the taxpayers about $10,000. But an adoption costs the people doing it between $20,000 to $40,000 or $50,000. And he said, why don't we subsidize adoptions? And I think it's personally a great idea. But it's a very liberal idea. It's very much saying let's fix a problem by social intervention and government laws. So this would be liberalism 101, trying to fix the world by social intervention and government involvement. Any questions on that before we go on? Go ahead, sir. Oh.
In practicality, isn't kind of the same thing?
So the question was... Yep, so the question was, in practice, is liberalism and being left-wing, are they the same thing? Technically, they're not. So the modern movement of liberalism is actually moves more towards the free markets, particularly neoliberalism. So there's a movement now of liberalism that says we want to be socially, we want to have no restrictions on us. And we want to basically create a society where people don't have any kind of restrictions on them, on their social and personal lives. But we also, one of the things they want to do is they say, let's help people by bringing in financial opportunities. So has anyone heard of a process called gentrification? Okay, So what gentrification is where you will go into the inner city and you'll start to put businesses in there, and you'll put shopping malls and really high-end restaurants and high-end apartments. And the idea of that is that it basically lifts the inner city out of poverty by creating the area around it becoming more high-end. So liberalism and left-wing in America often go hand in hand, but more modern liberals are actually a little bit wary of being left-wing. So most young liberals kind of stay away from the left-wing label as best they can. But generally, they do go, if you're left-wing, you join the Democratic Party, you know? Yeah, that tends to be the way it goes, absolutely. But in Europe, there would be parties that would be liberal but would not be left-wing at all. Any questions or thoughts? Or we go on? All right. Well, we'll cruise on. Yes, let's talk about capitalism. Capitalism. We'll bring up Luke 6:31. Luke 6:31. We'll talk a little bit about that. Capitalism is the belief that economic transactions should be private transactions between interested parties. If I want to buy Pastor Troy's car, that should just be between me and Pastor Troy, and no one should have it. If I want to buy a gun from Pastor Troy, that's between me and Pastor Troy. If I want to buy his house, no one else should get involved in that. If I offer him whatever, he can say no, he can say yes, that it just should be between us. That's what capitalism is. It says that the highest value in your transaction is the capital, is the money, that you get to decide how your money should work. And capitalism actually, oh yes, and this, the verse I'd put to this, it might seem a bit ridiculous, but in its own way it works. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And fundamentally, that's what capitalism says. It said, I'm going to offer you a deal, and I'm going to give you the deal you want. Or I'm going to give you the deal that would work for you right now. And you have the freedom to accept that or not accept it. I don't want someone else coming in and say, I'm going to do for you whatever I want to do for you, and you have to accept what I have to accept for you. Capitalism said, no, they don't. They get the freedom. You should give them a good deal. You should give them the deal that works for them. If I open up a restaurant that charges 3 times more than other restaurants, capitalism said, your restaurant's going to fail, and so it should. And that's kind of how capitalism works. And it's a great idea. It's a wonderful idea. It's brilliant because it's spreadsheets. It's that you should be making more than you're spending. What a revolutionary concept. And silly as it seems, it really is a revolutionary concept. It's only been around about 400 years where people invented a spreadsheet. Because before that, if you were a horseshoe maker, just because your dad was a horseshoe maker and his dad was a horseshoe maker and his dad was a horseshoe maker, and you went out and you bought iron and people went and they took your horseshoes and you didn't see any money from it. And whether you made money or lost money, nobody really cared. But the idea basically said, well, hold on, I'm not very good at horseshoes. I'm really good at making corn, so I'm going to make corn from now on. And I'm going to sell this corn for a price where I make some money over it. And that's a brilliant idea. And the thing about capitalism is it's absolutely been amazing. And just to give a little bit of what we have gone through, Edwin Hobbes said in the 1600s, life is dirty, brutish, and short. A few hundred years later, people were like, no, life is fun. I can buy some stuff. What is crazy to me right now is all of us in this room have more stuff, have cooler stuff than any emperor who ever lived in human history. Do you know if an emperor went to your house and saw your computer and your microwave and your iPhone and your air conditioning and your TV, they'd say, you want to trade this for the Roman Empire? I'll trade, no sweat. They would do it, no problem, for just a bottle of Tylenol. How great is Tylenol, you know? And it's such an amazing system, and it's done such great things. We have so much stuff. It's wonderful. In the past 120 years, human life expectancy has raised 40 years. That's pretty cool because we have such amazing medicine that keeps us going because we're willing to spend more on it. Countries like China or Nigeria or India or Japan, which were impoverished, which had millions of people dying in starvation in the last century, are now massive economic powerhouses. China is buying up huge swabs of Africa and bringing in industry and bringing in technology, and they have they have, in the past few years, Africa's become a powerhouse. It's been said China has done more to help the poor in Africa in the last 20 years than the past 300 years of missionaries. Capitalism, this idea that says, go be inventive. Go make the best thing that you can possibly make it cheap, make it good, and make it better than everyone else. And they went, okay, great idea, let's go do that. And it's been an amazing idea. It has worked such wonderful things. But can anyone tell me what the fundamental flaw in capitalism might be? How does it fail? What but might be an industry that you think that has struggled in the past couple of years? What's that? Oil and gas, yes, are very much subject to fluctuations in the economy. And part of that is people are saying, I want a better deal than oil and gas. Give me technology that is going to be more efficient than oil and gas. Steel, yes, steel is just getting way too expensive. So one of the big things we're doing in housing right now with lumber and steel costs are people like, give me a cheap house. And one of the things too, that we're so stinking rich, we can have moral purchases. I don't want to buy a house that isn't environmentally friendly. Know what your great-grandpa would have said about that? I'm cold and I don't want to die. Screw the bald eagles that used to live there, give me that house. You guys deal with the mess. But now people are like, oh, is this house biodegradable? That is a super rich person question, right? You have to be rich to be able to care about that kind of thing. But people do care about that thing. And one of the things the economy does is it will just it will mow over you if you're not, it is destructive. So we've all lived through, we've all watched Sears get replaced by Amazon. We've all watched Blockbuster get replaced by Netflix. What we might see in the future, we're going to see steel and wooden houses are going to get replaced by 3D printed houses. Oil-based cars are going to get replaced by electric cars. Now that might seem in its own way, and now we're like, as consumers, that's like, great, we're going to get something better, we're going to get something cheaper. It's really miserable if you're a car producer. Like we had Detroit, used to be like the envy of the world where everyone was making high-end money, and they had laws that said you can't bring in any of these foreign cars, and as soon as foreign cars came in, it went under because people made better cars, cheaper, faster. So capitalism can be really tough. It can be particularly tough what we've seen in the past couple of years where in America, it used to be a thing that if you worked in a factory, right out of high school, you could stay in that factory your whole life and have enough money for a house and a couple of vacations and retire. It'd be very hard to do that these days. Factory work just doesn't look the same. So capitalism is fundamentally destructive, and it's really great when you are a consumer. It's really hard when you're a producer. You always have to stay ahead. So and a lot of people kind of have looked at things today and said, oh, we're getting left behind. Well, Mexico's doing this, or people thought like that immigrants were the reason, or trade was the reason that jobs were dying in America. In fact, it was more just automation. People built machines that were able to do the job of 20 men. Particularly, say, somewhere like West Virginia, where people lived that were totally dependent on the coal mine industry. And it used to take 50 men could go in and they could mine a mountain. Now, and that would take them 6 months. Now, 2 guys can do it in 2 days with a machine, and nobody wants to buy the coal because they're ethical. Coal's really bad for the environment, and it's expensive, and there's better ways to do it. So capitalism can be fundamentally destructive, while it has been the greatest force for economic good the world has ever seen. Any questions on that? All right, sounds good. We'll keep on keeping on. Okay. All right, we'll talk about the next one we have. Socialism. Yes, good old socialism. And we'll read in this one Proverbs 31, verses 8 and 9. Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Socialism. It's the belief that economic transactions should be subject to government regulation. What does that mean? It means that society should benefit in every transaction that we make. So if I'm talking about buying Pastor Troy's gun, society comes in and said, well, hold on a second. Do we want you guys to be doing that? Would that benefit the people around you? If I want to buy Pastor Troy's car, hold on a second. Society needs to benefit from this transaction. Is this going to be helpful or hurtful to the people around you? Now, we might initially say, well, why is people getting involved? Well, maybe they should. If we see things the past couple of years, if you have a factory and you just decide to pump your factory's junk into the river, and there's about 40 farm fields that are dependent on that river for irrigation, and you're putting junk into there, well, yes, society needs to get involved and said what you're doing is harmful to the society around you. If certain people are putting out all these different, whatever it would be, if certain people are using our roads a whole lot more than everyone else, and yet we have to pay tremendous money for these roads, shouldn't the people who use it more have to pay more? And questions like that. So the Bible tells us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all those who are destitute. Speak up and fairly judge and defend the rights of the poor and needy. This is something the Bible fundamentally tells us to do. We have to look out for those in need. We have to look out. So socialism, people think it can help clean up the mess that capitalism causes sometimes. And it's a bit tough, and I'm not going to get too much into this, but I'll ask you a question here. This will be a tough one. Since World War II, who has been the most socialist president America has ever had? Johnson is often guessed, but no, not Johnson. Any other guesses? Most socialist president we've had since World War II. Reagan, he wouldn't quite make it, but yes, you're close enough, yeah. Yeah, big increase in national debts. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's actually Donald Trump. Donald Trump far and away takes the socialist crown. For example, what companies had private contracts with other nations like China, and Trump came in and said, or NAFTA, which was a thing that kind of got rid of the government's trade barriers, and said, nope, I'm going to come in, I'm going to take part of the money or tax part of that money because society should benefit from this transaction. That's pure socialism. To have massive increase into certain government programs like police or army, that we got in a massive debt for that, that would be socialism. The proposed land border to put a wall across the U.S. and Mexico would have been if it had happened, it would have been the greatest government land grab in the history of America. It would have been huge money and a huge entering into of private land. So Donald Trump, we often think of socialism as left wing, but actually we tend to find the right and left tend to be as socialist as one another. Just some people do it for the powerful, and some people do it for the less powerful. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes.
I think that's kind of misnomer. I think if you look back in American history, I look at socialistic ideas that we adopted. Social security being one,
Yeah.
unemployment being another,
Yeah.
workers' comp being another, public school education being another, overall socialistic ideas.
Oh, totally. The army is
Public hospitals.
the army, the police force, all socialist ideas. But somebody had to pay for them. We had to take somebody's money. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it did require.
But the only point I'm trying to make is I think in today's society we're looking at the poor taking it from the rich.
Yes. I agree with you. And that's why I want to make the point that we often have right-wing socialism. So right-wing socialism is as popular as left-wing socialism. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. But it is all dependent on a third party coming in and saying, I'm going to take some of that stuff. I'm going to do, because I think other people should benefit from this transaction. I'm not saying that's good, I'm not saying it's bad, but it certainly is the reality.
That's what the Democrats are doing right now.
Well, and the Republicans.
Donald Trump turned around and a lot of these companies or whatever, they weren't paying tariffs.
Right.
Okay, the United States, when they sent stuff to these other countries,
Yeah.
the companies had to pay the tariff.
No, they don't. Tariffs. So most of our they say most people pay tariffs. What we've been doing the past couple of years is capitalism gets rid of tariffs. Socialism brings them in.
And another thing is a lot of our companies went to different countries or whatever.
Yes.
They could get the labor force cheaper and all that.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was trying to get the companies, and he got a lot of the companies back here.
Well, no, we lost more than we gained under Trump, that would be sure. But the thing with it, and to point out to your point there, that's capitalism. So say you have an American company that is making car windows. And for them, a car window costs $40. But a guy in China said, I'm going to make that same car window for $12. Capitalism says, pick whichever one you want. And a capitalist might say, I'll get the $12 one because it's a lot cheaper and I can sell my product cheaper and get more money. A socialist would come in and say, hold on. You're going to mess over the American worker and we don't think you should do that. So I'm going to force you to buy from the American guy. I'm going to tax this guy so that they end up losing money. So the tariff concept is a socialist idea. It's 101 socialism. It's the okay, that's okay.
I used to be a Democrat, now I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
And in between, I voted for the person who was voting for the
Yes.
Okay. I just see that it's like right now, the Democrats are turning around and making all these programs or whatever.
Yeah.
The rich people aren't paying for these programs. It's our middle class people.
Yes, I agree.
Who's paying for it. And then the Democrats make it sound like, oh, we're going to pay for the rest and pay for these programs. It doesn't come out that way. It's the average middle class worker that's working his whole life or whatever trying to get ahead.
Yeah.
You know?
Mhm.
You have to look at that tax reform for them countries when they have to do it.
Yeah.
And who has the biggest tax?
Yeah.
Who pays the more tax? Who has the least amount of tax breaks? Who has the most?
So you're both in agreement here. So the question, we look at this and we say, we're going to do all these social programs, but it's going to end up being the middle class that's going to pay for it. And you're 100. Yeah.
Richest here in the country.
So a good example of this is Amazon didn't pay any taxes in America the last fiscal year and actually got a government rebate and refund on taxes that they never paid. So absolutely, the wealthiest people in America are paying far less taxes than a person who's making $50,000 a year to support their family. And absolutely, the programs that we're looking at joining now are probably invariably going to affect the middle class more than the wealthy. Now, it would still be socialism. It would still be a form of right-wing socialism that adjusts private contracts for the betterment of the more powerful. Yeah. Now, again, my point here is not to say what's right or what's wrong. My point is for us to maybe get outside of our way of thinking a little bit and to say, well, we might be very against one group, or we can at least say, I can see the value in this form of thinking.
Those are socialism also like Germany has socialism, right? In their healthcare, Canadians have socialism in their healthcare. The government pays for the healthcare or whatever. They don't have private healthcare.
Well, let's go to the next slide. So some countries are capitalist, some are socialist, some are try to be communist, the belief that all property is owned. But let's go to the next slide. And what's called a blended economy. And that's an economy that has elements of capitalism, socialism, and even a bit of communal ideas. Every single economy in the entire world is a blended economy. Every economy has free interaction, private interactions, and it has interactions that the government gets involved. So you mentioned certain European countries would have socialized healthcare, where America It actually does have socialized health. It is blended healthcare. It has both. The government charges a lot. The government charges about as much for healthcare in America as it does in Germany or Britain or one of those countries, but it's not as socialized as they are. We have a mix, a blended healthcare economy, whereas other countries have. Where I grew up in Ireland, you would have socialized healthcare. Absolutely, yeah. Communism doesn't really exist anywhere in the world in its purest form. It did. There were still lots of private transactions, but the government. Cuba, yeah.
Cuba is still a communist country.
It is, but they really have a lot of.
They got a lot more freedom now.
Yeah, hugely. Yeah, the Soviet Union, yeah.
As soon as the communists went to the other part,
Mm-hmm.
and then the country started dividing up into different other countries.
Yeah.
So I went from a rich country to a poor country.
Who did?
Russia.
No, Russia's been poor for a very, very long time. Yeah. Yeah, Russia's been poor for about 70 years. It's been, been very deeply in poverty. Yeah. It's getting better. Their economy's getting better. It's more capitalist now than it ever has been, though it's still very corrupt. Absolutely. So the thing with socialism or capitalism, we don't have a pure form of either. We have blended. America is a blended economy. People will say, the socialism of Scandinavia. Scandinavia has plenty of capitalism. It's very much a blended economy. Both economies tend to run on these two. We'll try and rush through the last few here as we go forward. So this is a little bit about economy. The next slide, what we'll do for this one, we're going to talk a little bit about multiculturalism. And we'll go to Revelation 7, 9, and 10, if anyone wants to take these, pull open those. So multiculturalism, we'll do Revelation 7, 9, and 10. Multiculturalism is the belief that all groups can peacefully coexist together and grow stronger from frequent interaction and cooperation. We live in an increasingly multicultural world. You can talk to people on the other side of the world in Taiwan or Cameroon or Russia and have a fun old conversation, and we'll find we have more in common than we thought we did. Government leaders can all sit in the same room together and have an old chat and be very friendly to each other and drink coffee and tea and be good old friends. We find that internationally we cooperate financially than we ever have before. Did you know violence of all kinds has been plummeting in the world since the 1970s? There has never been a more peaceful time to live than this day and age. There's so fewer wars. There's so much fewer murders. It is a very peaceful time to be alive. And part of that is due to multiculturalism. Nobody wants to go out there and kill those guys anymore because they used to be the horrible Hun that we'd never seen before in our lives. Well, now we know people from those countries. We've found out that when the Spanish are really good at making steel and the Russians are really good at natural gas, Russia doesn't want to take over Spain for their steel. Russia says, I'll give you some of our natural gas for some of your steel. And they'll shake hands and be good friends and have a jolly old time.
How about a war that's been going on forever?
Which... Yes, but it's far less violent than it was. You look at the history of when Babylon took over it, and Canaan was there, and they were sacrificing little babies. Or when the Roman Empire was there, and they crucified so many people that they literally ran out of wood in Israel. While it is very violent, it is far less violent than it was. Violence is declining in the world very, very quickly. And it's largely due to multiculturalism. And we read our Revelation 7 verse. It tells us, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, people, tribe, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and waving palm branches, and they were crying out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God and he who sits upon the throne. Here is something wild. Heaven will be multicultural. Heaven will have people from all nations. That'll be wonderful. And we'll all be great friends. And we'll all be wonderfully unified in the world. Yes, so it's kind of a really cool and exciting thing. What might be the problem with multiculturalism? You're all so positive. I asked you the problems, you're like, oh, there are none. What a great idea. The problem can actually be, it's great when we look at our Revelation verse where everyone was joined together and singing how great one God is. What happens when someone comes in and they don't share the ideal of let's all work together peacefully and love one another? As Christians, we believe in religious freedom. I want you to be Christian, but I don't believe in forcing you. I don't believe you should be forced to be my religion. I want it to be by faith and not by the law. Someone else might say, I do believe in forcing you. I think the law should say, my way is right and your way is wrong, and I'm going to stop you from doing that. That's not a Christian idea, but not everyone's Christian. You don't have to be a Christian to be a multiculturalist. What if someone says, I'm going to force you to think the way I think? I'm going to come in and I'm going to destroy your religion. As some people believe they should. I'm going to stop you from being a Christian because I don't believe you should preach that stuff. I consider it hate speech. We can have multiculturalism, but it only works if everyone agrees we have to get along and give one another freedom. Often in the world today, our differences that we have with one another are perceived as an attack. I've often had that conversation where someone says, well, you don't agree with my behavior. That's right, I don't. Well, I want you to agree with my behavior. Well, I don't. You're just trying to force me to do what you want me to do. I'm not forcing you. I love you. And I just think that God's got something better for you and you should change your behavior. Well, that's just judging me. I'm not judging you. God's going to judge you. I'm just letting you know you're going to be judged. Well, I want you to agree with everything that I want to do with my life. Well, I'm not going to agree. That's hate speech. You're judging me. You see, I don't mind if someone says, I'm going to have a certain kind of behavior. I believe they should have the freedom to do it, as long as it doesn't, negatively affect those around them. But when they want to destroy your right, we have a problem. And this is where multiculturalism we often find is a struggle, as we've had waves of different groups that have come in from other countries. Certain groups have found themselves living in a community that no longer shares their values quite quickly. And it's quite unnerving. Whether it's good or bad, it's unnerving. So let's look at our next one. Ethnocentrism. This is one of my favorite little images. These two lovely ladies looking at each other and saying, oh, everything or nothing covered but our eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. Ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture is superior to other cultures. Exposure and introduction to beliefs contrary to your own will be detrimental to society. We won't bring it up, but maybe an example of this would be the Tower of Babel, where this one group, wanted to have their own personal greatness, and we all come together that our group is going to be the best, and I'm going to raise to the top, and I'm going to have a thing that reaches to the heavens, and we're going to be better than other people. And it was kind of ethnocentrism. And so now one of the reasons it's seen as a negative today, in most circles it seems as negative to be ethnocentric. And historically it should be, because some very nasty people have been ethnocentric. I hate your country and it's a rotten old place and my place is the best, and if you're not like mine, you're awful. And there's a nastiness in that, absolutely. That can definitely be true. But is it also okay to say, I think one of the things we can't say today, we say, well, all cultures are equal and all cultures are good, and you can't say one culture is better than another. Can't I? I really don't want to live in Papua New Guinea or Uganda. That'd be pretty awful. Not going to lie. Being a missionary, you go to another country and you kind of have to look at it and say, like I used to live in the former Soviet Union, I was like, man, parts of this suck. This is horrible gray buildings and people are miserable and there's corruption and poverty, and I miss America. It's really awesome there. People smile on the streets and are nice to you, and I pay you a price and you don't need to bribe you to get it and things like that. I was talking to a friend the other day, and she's a female doctor, and she was talking about that. I said I was a Christian. Said, oh, well, the Christians brought about all the Crusades, and they killed all those innocent Muslims, and what a terrible bunch the Christians are. And I said, yeah, the Crusades are pretty bad, but if we hadn't have done that, you would not be a doctor today. You would be wearing a burqa, and you would be submitted to your husband who would do whatever he basically wanted. You wouldn't have ever gotten this education. And I don't mean to be cruel about that. I'm not trying to demean, or I'm not trying to say the Crusades are okay, but this person is really, really glad that their culture wasn't dominated by a different culture. It is a tough one. It is a tough one to get across. As Christians, we are called to see the positives in other groups and other cultures. What we have to see is to see the church be unique and see great things in other things. But it's okay to look at certain things as a bit of a warning and say, I don't want to end up like that. So that's a bit of a tough one right there. Okay. Well, we're over time already, so we'll try and finish up a little bit. Well, I'll finish these last two super quick, and then we'll leave it there. So next one is libertarianism. And that's the belief that freedom from forced behavior is the ultimate good. Liberty is the ultimate good. The aim of society is to remove anything that limits individual expression or desires. Libertarianism is, don't tread on me. Leave me alone. And the fundamental idea, and we could look to the Bible and find this. In 1 Samuel 18, the people went to Samuel and said, give us a king. And Samuel said, oh no, that's a really dumb idea. Kings they're gonna tax you like crazy. They're gonna make your sons go to war. They're gonna make your daughters serve the king. They're gonna take your best lands. They're gonna take your best crops. You really don't want a king. And what did the Israelites say? Give us a king. And a libertarian would look at that and say, why didn't they just leave it alone? Freedom from those things. And this became a really big movement in the middle of the 20th century. Because people looked at the government, and it's grown ever since, and said, the government's really, really stupid. After World War I, people came back and said, millions and millions of good, tens of millions of good people died. And what did we accomplish? Not much. After Vietnam, people said, what was that worth it? After Watergate and race riots and incredibly skyrocketing debt and government incompetency and increased amounts of economic crashes, people are saying, why are these idiots in charge? And they said, if people could make their own choices, they're going to make better choices. They believe that people are amazing at making best choices for themselves. They'll make their best choices with religion, best choices with economics, best choices for medical care. Leave them alone. And the idea, it seemed good. People do tend to make often quite smart choices. What's the fundamental problem? Ne'er was a truer word said. People are really, really stupid. Libertarians said, we shouldn't make drugs illegal. Oh my goodness. People take drugs. That's a really stupid thing to do. People are really, people say, hey, leave my guns alone. You know what stupid things people do with guns? And where? Where does it say that? Where it doesn't? It's, yes. Quote the whole amendment for me. Okay, well, I'll give you a hint. It starts with these wonderful words, a well-regulated militia. So the first statement of the Second Amendment is regulations, laws. So but it does give us, and said a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the Union, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So it doesn't simply say, it doesn't say you have the right to protect yourself. It says for the ability to have peace and protection, there should be a militia that's subject to laws that can protect the Union. But all that to say, I'm not trying to pick on whether the Second Amendment is good or what it actually says, but a libertarian would say, let me have whatever guns I want. The rest of us have to say, what happens when idiots get guns? Like you said, people often can be very stupid. So to fix people being stupid, we created a great idea, authoritarianism. Let's just make being stupid illegal. The belief that adherence to a singular authority would lead to ultimate social prosperity. Pastor Troy, aren't you aware if your congregation only did what you asked them to do on Sunday, their lives would be so much better?
They have no idea.
Well, and it's actually quite true. Most people actually are quite smart. And if you let smart people tell you what to do with your life, it's probably a good thing. Trust your doctor, trust your financial advisor, trust your teacher, trust your mama. They're great ideas. And so they said, if people do stupid things, let's make stupid illegal. And so our good friend Kim Jong-un, who's the grandfather of Kim Jong-un, decided to have North Korea be a great country where one smart guy would be in charge and everyone would have to do what they say. So they would say, but the problem with that is, what would be the problem of having one person making stupidity illegal, or being evil illegal, or doing bad things illegal? Even worse than that, whatever they think is stupid, evil, or bad. What's worse than that, though, is the person in charge is often stupid, evil, and bad. It would be great if one moral person would get up there, and that's why we love Jesus, because he is perfect and wonderful, and will come and rule, and everything will be great. But in the meantime, a lot of very stupid and horrible people have tried to take the role that was reserved for Christ, and they did it with the best of intentions. Hitler thought he was a savior. Pol Pot said to himself, I'm not a violent man, even though he killed about 25% of his country. Joseph Stalin, again, thought he was a savior of the people. These Kim Jong-un has a sort of semi-divine status. While they take these roles, they do it with the best of intentions. They think they're trying to help people out, but unfortunately, they end up causing tremendous untold destruction. So, that's all I have for tonight. Let's finish up. Any thoughts you guys have had? Anything, any way you've been challenged, or any way you think that I'm absolutely crazy and wrong, or what are you thinking tonight? Or any comments or things like that? Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's fundamentally one of the great things we've learned. A plurality of ideas tends to help us out. Now, there was a fascinating scientific study done, and it basically did brain scans on people. And it said, we're going to look at a brain scan and we're going to figure out what your political leaning is. And it found that people who have a larger prefrontal cortex, which often is the idea prefrontal cortex, that has a lot of ideas, that has innovation and tries new things, tended to be more liberal. And then it found people who had large medulla oblongata, which is very good at finding threats, is very good at seeing danger, and is very good at establishing rules, tended to be more conservative. And what we found is the people who are innovators, the people who are creating brand new products and great ideas, the people who are inventors, tended to be liberal, tended to be and have large things. But the managers, the people that created the rules that made the company work, tended to have the larger medulla oblongata, tended to be more conservative. And so we found society tends to benefit. They said if everyone had this big prefrontal cortex and everyone was liberal and they were all about trying new things, in its early stages, humanity probably would have had a magic mushroom party and jumped off a cliff believing they could fly. And if everyone had these big medulla oblongatas that was obsessed with fighting, probably would have gotten to a war while starving with one another because they weren't planting enough crops and were all fighting. The reality is that often what we have, this great mix that we have, has enabled us as a species, as a people, to grow and to see incredible new things. So there's great truth in what you're saying. Go ahead, sir. If you want a great example of that, go on Facebook, look up Mitt Romney, and read the comments. I have never seen such hateful displays. Mine. I'm sure there's something on the left side. I don't mean to pick on anyone. But you're absolutely right. We don't forgive. Or what's that? Well, Pelosi she votes always in line with her party. But what's his name? Joe Manchin, I think, out of Virginia. Yeah, he gets some very nasty comments. He's a great compromiser. We're not very good at being disappointed. As opposed to politics actually working, it's become a bit of a sports game where my guy's got to break and destroy your guy. You know, and if you turn coat and fight. So you're absolutely right. We're not very good at being disappointed. Saying, well, I didn't get everything I wanted, but I got some stuff. And you're absolutely right. But part of it comes down to this idea, I think, that we've bought in, and it's an idolatry, that the other guy's going to destroy the country. So I have to protect the country from this destructive force and things like that, and whatever my guy says. And this is where, you know, it was a great example of this. Someone did a wonderful experiment where they went on social media and they said that outside of a mosque, and someone put out a story on social media that a right-wing group had spray painted Muslims out or something on the side of the mosque, and we were going to have a big protest of solidarity to support people at this mosque, and it was going to be on Friday at 3 p.m. Then they put out another story that said the cleric at this mosque was preaching death to America and hatred to America, and we're going to have a big protest outside that mosque at Friday at 3 p.m. And so a big liberal group mad at right-wingers came at this mosque, and a big left-wing group came to this mosque, all for two events that never even happened. They were completely made up. But there's a thing that's sort of this narrative that we have to get involved in things and get angry about these different things. It's sort of a fact that we've even created problems that don't exist out of fear of the other. Absolutely. And any other thoughts, folks? Oh, go ahead, sir. Indeed.
So compromise wasn't that far. And now it seems like everybody is moving to the fringes. So the middle is so far away now that people just can't get it. And I think if they came back to the middle, compromise would be more possible. But now, you know, you've got some real black, as a Christian, you've got some real black and white issues that are real problems. And it's hard to bridge that gap now because they've seen, how do you get gray on that? There's no gray in there that we can compromise on.
Yeah. See, well, one of the things I think as Christians, we've made a lot of gray things. You said there's some black and white issues, and I agree with you 100%. The problem we have, though, is a lot of Christians are freaking out about everything. They're mad about 100 different issues. And so it's hard for us the Christian movement towards republicanism, which we've seen rapidly decline the past couple of years, came about because the Republican Party said, we're going to get involved in ending abortion, in sanctity of marriage, anti-pornography laws, and prayer in schools. Republican movement got really behind those ideas. Never did a whole lot about them, but they always said they would. And so Christians became overwhelmingly Republican. And now people are questioning, well, because we haven't seen the development we wanted in those areas, is this thing moving? But one of the other areas that's really fascinating is a few months ago, I went to the Minnesota History Center, and we looked up, I live in a tiny little town, 600 people, and I looked up the newspaper from my town about 80 years ago, and it was so boring. Oh, the Johnsons met together with the Simpsons, and they had a spaghetti dinner, and they had some vanilla ice cream for dessert, and had a lovely time, you know? Or, Ron Swanson over there, he had a heart attack last night, and Bill Ruber out of town, his barn blew down, and and I remember looking at this and said, this isn't news. Give me some good, juicy news. Tell me about an old riot out in California, you know? Give me some government corruption, you know? Give me a shooting. Give me something to sink my teeth into. And what was really fascinating about that, as I looked at that, and I remember thinking how boring it was, I actually had to hold myself back and say, well, hold on. The stuff I'm talking about actually should really bore me. If there's a wildfire out in California, what am I going to do about it? You know, there's a shooting out in Texas. I'm going to drive down Texas, tell them don't have a shooting. I'm not going to do anything about that. You know, of something. And a friend of mine the other day was going on and on and on and on about some pipeline out in the Dakotas. I'd like to know if anyone's old enough to remember, when on earth was Minnesotan people talking about pipelines in the Dakotas? Like, when was that a thing we talked about over dinner? That was never very interesting. We had other things. But this local newspaper was talking about families I knew. Oh, they went out and had dinner. I should have those guys over. Oh, no, Ron had a heart attack. I best go over and visit Ron and see what I can do for him. Oh, Bill's barn burned down. Why don't I go over there and give him a hand raising his barn? Now, while that was boring, it was information that was societal, that I actually could do something about, that was actually relevant to my sphere of influence. A big part of what we've done today is we absorb so much information that we can't do anything about. And what do we do when we can't do anything about it? We get stressed. We get angry. It causes us anxiety. We go on social media and we have a big rant about it. Or we watch more news feeling that if we just watch enough, somehow that's going to fix things. But it's not. In fact, we're stressing out about things that really don't have anything to do with us, and we really shouldn't really care that much about, you know? So it's a bit of a tough one. Yeah. Any other thoughts, folks? I've already gone way over time, I'm aware. I'm sorry about that. All right. Well, good stuff. Well, we'll leave it there, and next week, like I said, we'll talk a little bit about history of empires in the Bible, and we'll talk some Daniel and Revelation, and I'll reveal who the mark of the beast is about. So that'll be really good. I'll reveal the identity of the Antichrist.